Hi, welcome. It is Sunday, January 29th. Okay, enough already. Elihu has worn me out. I have read his teachings several times, his speeches. I've read two different commentaries, and I'm left with a whole handful of questions that I don't have answers for. He has kind of wound all over the place. Um, every once in a while, I get little nuggets that seem to say, ah, yes, but then he goes off on another tangent. Um, Elihu has come forward now at the end. He's presumed to know the answers when no one else has. He kind of connects some things, but then other things he's just out in left field with. Uh, in the end, I guess I don't know. I'm feeling okay. Like I'm not a dummy because as I check with scholars, even they can't all agree on exactly where he's going and what he's saying and how it fits. But nonetheless, in the end, what does happen here today is that Elihu has set the stage for God finally coming on the scene and speaking. Because the reality is, Elihu has made it clear that Job's friends did not and do not have the answer. He's made it clear that Job does not have the answer. And in reality, his speech has said that only God can provide the answer and an explanation for Job's suffering. Although he kind of winds back and forth, tying it back into um, some sort of penalty for sin, but and then other times he says no, that's not really what it is. But the idea that he gets to is right. Elihu gets to the point where he says God is the only one who knows the answers and can explain it. However, he gets there for the wrong reasons, as we read over and over, railing at Job and telling him he's got to quit yelling at God, and that all that does is express his own unbelief, and he's not giving Job any credit for emotions and the suffering that he's undertaken. And obviously, he probably wasn't around at the beginning where Job uh, expresses his faith in God and trust in Him. But in the end, whatever the point is, we finally get to this point where in chapter 38 now God will speak, and we've heard all the arguments, we've gone back and forth, and we're ready to do that, and looking forward to it finally. But what I do want to share with you is in the midst of the study, I was looking at chapter 35 specifically, and verses 10 and 11 in there, and I was looking at a particular commentary by David McKenna, who at one time was the seminary president at Asbury Theological Seminary. And he had some marvelous explanations on the motivation for prayer based upon chapter 35, verses 10 and 11. And I thought they were so good that I want to share them with you today. The first thing is, if you recall verses 10 and 11 of chapter 35, it says, "But no one says, 'Where is God my Maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of heaven.'" And I didn't realize this, but McKenna writes that countless sermons have been preached on this very text. And he gives basically three reasons and motivations for prayer. The first one is to seek the presence of God. That always should be our primary motivation. Now, the reality is, whether we're weak in faith or even whether we're pretty mature in faith, many times the circumstances of our lives, the needs that we have, call us to go to God, and many times we jump right into asking God for all sorts of things. And that may be misguided, but nonetheless it gets us into prayer. And the idea is the more often you do that, the more you ultimately, as you become wiser and mature, you realize that it really is first and foremost about being in the presence of God. Now, the second thing that McKenna would say is a motive for prayer is in the presence of God, then we sing songs in the night. And I wondered what that phrase meant. And as he explains it, nighttime is the time when we think of darkness, we think of evil, we think of the things that trouble us because they will prevent us from falling asleep at night. And many people lay awake at night with fears and worries and other things. And it's in the midst of those that, with the presence of God, when we are mature and trusting in Him, that even in the midst of those, we find ourselves going to God. So in the middle of the night, with all the troubles and trials and struggles and fears, we are still able to sing those songs with God in the midst of those struggles. And actually, Job, in verse 21 of chapter 1, did that very thing. He said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And I think that's a good thing for us to remember. Number one, prayer is bringing us into the presence of God. Number two, the more we are in the presence of God, even in the midst of trials and suffering and struggles and pain, God will provide for us the song to sing, a song of a trusting faith in Him. And so there's those two things. And then finally, what we realize in prayer when we go to God is that there is a mystery and a meaning of being human. We realize that as human beings, there's something special about us, though we don't have the answers. And there was a phrase he used here, and I'll just share this with you, where he says, life with meaning through faith, not life with all the answers, is the wisdom reserved for persons who pray in the presence of God. Prayer on a consistent basis, coming first into the presence of God, learning that even in the midst of suffering, to go to Him, and finally producing within us a life full of meaning and joy, and faith is what it's all about. And that is human existence. So if we're searching to have all the answers, we will be sadly disappointed. We will be frustrated. In fact, it might lead us to turn away from God. But if we trust in Him and we walk by faith, we get to the point where we don't need all the answers. God is the only one who has all the answers. Many things in our lives will remain a mystery until that time when we see our Lord face to face. And so, as we think about this and we come near to the end of Job and we're ready to hear God's answer, I thought it was a good reminder, for me anyway, to consider why I pray and how I pray. And I hope it's beneficial for you too. Have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you again.